Welcome to the center of the universe and the home of the 18-time Grey Cup champion Toronto Argonauts. This is the X's and Argos podcast with Ben Grant and JB.
Welcome to the X's and Argos postgame reaction podcast brought to you by Something in the Water Brewing. Ben Grant, joined as always by JB, as the Toronto Argonauts down the Winnipeg Blue Bombers in what was one of the most absurd games we've ever seen. A 2-point win in overtime. Just about everything that you could imagine happened in this game except offensive production from the Toronto Argonauts. We'll cover it all. But before we get to that, and before we get to your initial reactions, JB, I want to tell you about my time at Something in the Water today. It was great to hang out with so many listeners. We had dozens of listeners down there. Adam Goss was there as well, the voice of the Argos. Will Gertler from Argo Fans, of course, was there in the fan cast. He was down there, and so many listeners that came up to say hi, to interact, to ask questions, and of course, everyone enjoying great Something in the Water beer. Something in the Water is the best place to go pre-game. If you're going to BMO Field, it's just steps from BMO Field. It's steps from Lamport Stadium. If you want to check out Argos practice and then go somewhere to grab a pint, Something in the Water Brewing is the way to go. JB, initial reactions. Give me your thoughts on tonight's game. What happened?
Well, I mean, I know you don't believe in football gods, but if there were ever proof that the football gods existed, I think the football gods threw a party for Pete Martin and made sure that the Argos came out on top.
It felt at some points like there was some divine intervention there. It was a strange game filled with, like, as I said, I don't even know where to start because there's so many talking points and so many things to go through here. But why don't we start with the Argos offensive plan and the lack of production that they had? So Cameron Dukes started the game for the Argos. It's not that he made mistakes, but it looked like the same Cam Dukes that was hesitant to throw the ball downfield. And, what we ended up with Dukes going 3 for 4 for 37 yards. That doesn't sound like a disaster, but there were open receivers downfield and he wasn't seeing them. He wasn't taking shots. It was still conservative. And so Coach Dinwiddie pulled him after the first quarter, and Nick Arbuckle came in and he played quarters number 2, 3, 4 and overtime. And I'm not sure Arbuckle was getting much better play. He ended up 12 of 22 for 87 yards. Or terrible offensive production, especially with 3 quarters and overtime of play. To be 12 of 22 those aren't good numbers, and 87 yards passing it's just horrible figures. But Dukes wasn't getting it done either. What would you have done? Would you have left Dukes in there? Would you have put Dukes back in the second half? Like, what was the right way to handle that?
No, I mean, it did. Yeah, I know I sort of came out on in favor of their plan, but look, Dukes just did not have it at the beginning. I mean, he was taking way too long to get rid of the ball, 4, 5, 6 seconds. And you just, I mean, at least Arbuckle did not get sacked 11 times, which is, I think, what would have happened had Dukes stayed in the game. Where he just was so unable to pull the trigger on the throws that I just think you couldn't keep him in. I think they had to make the change. I think it was a problem. I mean, like, essentially the offensive line is like, what's happening here? Like you've got to throw the ball. You can't hold on to the ball for 6 seconds. So unfortunately, I mean, he didn't look like the Dukes from earlier in the season. He looked more like the shell-shocked Dukes. I mean, the fact that Arbuckle did not look very good is not, I would say, super encouraging moving forward. I don't know how many games Pete Martin has for us, but I think they had to make the change. But we can talk separately about whether Arbuckle looked up to the task, because he didn't really. But I don't think they had any choice. I don't think you can start Dukes again. I think Dukes' time as the starter has come to an end.
I feel like that as well. I feel like that first quarter, that was sort of his last chance. You don't often see, like, it would be really unusual for Coach Dinwiddie at this stage to again go back to Cameron Dukes. Because the problem is you don't want to take, if Arbuckle's going to be your starter, and I'm not even sure that's the best option right now either. I think we may be on the verge of having some Brian Scott conversations here. But if you do go with Arbuckle, then you don't want to take reps away from him. You want Arbuckle to have all those reps. So this week in practice, it was basically split first team reps, which is fine for a situation like this. If you're platooning quarterbacks, you're transitioning from one to the other. I get that. But I think going forward, if you decide Arbuckle is going to be your guy, then I think you have to give Arbuckle most of those, if not all of the first team snaps, and see if in a week, and it's a long week because they don't play Calgary until Sunday, in that week that you have a chance to maybe get him a little bit more comfortable, a little bit more on the same page with his receivers, because it just seemed like he looked not lost, but he just didn't have answers.
He had some really, you could just tell, like, the timing throws were just, he had not practiced any of them. He didn't have any sense of how fast the receiver was, when they're going to be at a certain spot. He looked like somebody who had not worked with his receivers.
And that's basically what he is. And so, like, if you're not following at home and you say, well, does it mean he doesn't know the plays? Like, no, that's not it. He knew the plays. He knows what his job is, but every receiver is different. There's so many little intricacies with every receiver that you as a quarterback have to develop a familiarity, a rapport. This is why you always see these great quarterback receiver tandems that seem to kind of have a sixth sense, know what the other is going to do, know what the other is thinking. And Arbuckle did not have that sixth sense going on tonight at all. He just didn't, there was no.
I'm not sure he had more than three.
Maybe. And it's not really on him. He hasn't had the reps. He hasn't had time with these guys. Makai Polk, Davaris Daniels, DeMonte Coxey. These aren't players like maybe Davaris doesn't fit into that. And he did really lean towards Davaris when big plays were up. But Coxey was largely invisible tonight. And that's been a guy that you would think you would go to in a situation where Rasheed Bailey's not there. You're looking for somebody that you can rely on. DeMonte Coxey did not have a catch tonight, not one catch tonight. And he was in a matchup that I thought was going to be pretty favorable. So that was odd. Makai Polk played great. He had 5 targets. But Kadeem Carey led the team in targets and catches because you know where the running back's going to be. And Nick Arbuckle continued, and Dukes did it as well, but they continued to look short and dump passes off to the running back, dump passes off into the flat. And that's just it's not a great way to score points.
Well, I mean, they didn't score points.
No, well, that's it. That's exactly it. They scored 2 field goals and a field goal in overtime, from which they gained, 7 yards, and then kicked the overtime field goal.
We can talk about the rollout pass play on first down.
That is not what I would have dialed up on that play. Like, there was so many. Oh my goodness!
What on earth was that play call? That had to be. I mean,
I don't know what they're trying to, like, if they're trying to catch Winnipeg out or something. Like, Davaris was actually open on the sideline, but Arbuckle started to roll to his right, sort of panic through the ball towards nobody in particular. It landed on the ground. I don't even like. It looked closer to being intentional grounding than almost anything else. But
not great football.
No, it was not. So that's quarterbacks covered. We've got a lot of talking points tonight. And again, we can laugh at this a little bit. It ended in a Toronto win, but this is a win where you just kind of shake your head for each of the next 3 days and count your blessings, because, like you said, someone was smiling down on the Argos tonight. This was not a game they deserved to win. If you look at looking at the numbers alone, so Zach Collaros, 317 yards passing with a touchdown and an interception. 317. The Argos ended up with 114 yards passing. Is that right? Is that my math? 114 yards passing, 124 yards passing. That's me not carrying, but still, whatever. Yeah, that is not going to do it. And then you say, well, yeah, but maybe on the ground. No. Brady Oliveira, 96 yards on the ground. Strevler with 19 yards on the ground. Kadeem Carey was okay, but 62 yards rushing. Dan Adeboboye, 24 yards rushing. They just didn't have yardage. 205 yards of net offense for the Argos, 400 yards of net offense for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. That's pitiful. You can't win the football game like that, and
well,
yet
I mean,
the Argos did.
yeah, I mean that they're clearly regressing as the league gets more and more tape. I mean, each week becomes more and more of an offensive fiasco. I mean, you can look at the total yards, and it just basically didn't start that high, and now we're down to essentially not being able to move the ball. Which makes Winnipeg's decision to not kick the field goal all the weirder. Because I mean, I would have gladly laid a bag of gold on Toronto having to go the length of the field. What evidence did Winnipeg have that they weren't going to be able to blitz into dust?
Let's talk about those two plays, the 2 3rd-and-1s, both of which weren't converted. So Toronto's happened first. Toronto's up by a touchdown. It's in the fourth quarter, about 5 minutes remaining, and Toronto well within field goal range. They're facing a 3rd-and-1. I actually think in that situation, it is the right that you should go for it. On 3rd-and-1, right there in that situation, I think you absolutely do go for it, but you have to get it. You have to execute. In the CFL, I almost always think you should go for it on 3rd-and-1. And in that scenario, I think Coach Dinwiddie's right, but you've got to find a way to get the yard. And I don't love Cameron Dukes scraping down the line, trying to get a yard against Adam Bighill.
No, right. I didn't blame Dukes, because I'm like, well, I mean, I thought Dukes did pretty well, to be honest, for meeting Bighill in the hole. Of course, like if you have a 6 foot, like Strevler, if you essentially have a fullback or a huge human being who is your short yardage quarterback, I think you might toss that up to a 50-50. But, with Dukes, I just did not understand. I didn't like that. I didn't like that play call at all. Like, no, that is getting way too cute against a veteran linebacker core.
Now, on the other side, I didn't like Winnipeg's decision to go for it. And I think you're probably in agreement there too, only because I always think it's right to go for it on 3rd-and-1. There are some rare exceptions, and tonight was an exception because Toronto couldn't move the football. Like you said, Winnipeg facing a 3rd-and-1 well within field goal range with how much time was there on the clock there? Less than a minute on the clock at that stage?
Yeah, just about. I think
about
it was
a minute on the
just
clock.
at 1 minute.
And in that situation, I think what they want to do, they want to convert the third down. They want to take it all the way down to zeros, kick the field goal as the last play of the game. But in that situation, I think you're right. Like, in knowing how tough it had been for Toronto to get any offense at all, kicking the field goal there, put it on Toronto and say, okay, well, at worst, so the way to lose the game is to let up a touchdown. I couldn't envision that happening the way Toronto was moving the football. And I think even getting a field goal to tie it up would have been really tough for the Argos at that stage. But Winnipeg decides to go for it, and what a huge stand the defense made to step up. And I'm not even sure you got to see some replays. We weren't getting much in the way of replays up in the booth today. Usually we do at home. We get a pretty good collection of them. Today we weren't really getting a lot. Was that the right spot? Like, to me, watching it live, I thought Strevler had the first down.
Yeah,
Could you tell?
Yeah, I mean, I think a couple things. I mean, clearly, when you watch Toronto then tried to move the ball after getting the ball back, you could see pretty clearly they were not able to do that, which must have been galling for Winnipeg. No, I thought Strevler got it.
Yeah,
it was a terrible spot. And just the reality was, with such a mass of people, there was no way to turn it over. But you could see, like, why Strevler was going bananas on the sidelines was, he didn't get it by much, but he did not get pushed back. Like, he definitely got the 1 yard they needed. But that's all part of this game's magic. It was not to be for Strevler. Yeah, that was a tough break for Winnipeg.
That was, and I agree with you. I don't know if that was the right either a call on the field or
Oh,
command
well,
center, but
I thought it was pass interference on the touchdown too.
well, there was so many other things. Let's talk about. So yeah, let's talk about all of these plays because I felt like the Argos got two big breaks, but then also had a few things really go against them. I felt like, the officiating in the CFL, I think is generally really good. I think it is the best officiated league that I follow, and that includes other sports. I really do think CFL officials are excellent, but today I felt like there were a lot of missed calls for both teams. So we talked about let's talk about those two Toronto ones. So Tavares McFadden, his touchdown, that one I was a little like the last angle that I saw was finally a time where I was like, you know what, maybe that isn't actually pass interference because it certainly looked like Deshaun Amos got there early. But on the last angle that I saw, while he does have a hand on, was it Dembski? I can't even remember who the Winnipeg
I
receiver
think
was
so.
there. But he has a hand on his shoulder. But I don't see a grab. I don't see a pull. I don't see a push. I see him more marking this is where he is. And he reaches around with the other hand. And to kind of reinforce that play in overtime where he does almost exactly the same thing. He's got a hand there, but he never actually touched the receiver. He's just sort of marking him and he reaches around with the other hand and knocks that ball away. That's that's the only angle I saw. If you'd called it PI on the field, there's no way you would have overturned it. And I think looking at that replay, that last angle that I saw, that's probably the one where they're like, you know what, I don't think that's PI. But I think most of the time that does get called pass interference. So the Argos may have gotten a gift there. They may have gotten a gift on the Strevler one. But let's talk about the other ones too, because I thought there were three plays in quick succession where the Argos did not at all get a break. And those all came in the fourth quarter too. So it started with what I thought was a phantom procedure penalty that ended up getting called on Ryan Hunter. You watching the TV broadcast, is there anything you saw that I didn't? Because what I saw was the Winnipeg defensive end jump into the neutral zone and the right side of the Argos line react to it. And then a bunch of other people moved. Did you see something different on that
It was
call?
very weird. They did not get into an explanation of it. They just kind of moved past it. But it was, yeah. I mean, it seemed like clearly they called it on Winnipeg, and then suddenly they changed their mind.
Right. And it left like Coach Dinwiddie was raging at that point. And then on the very next play, they're now backed up. It's like 2nd and 15 situation. And on the very next play, Arbuckle goes deep downfield to Tavares Daniels. And I was pretty sure there was a pass interference call on that play. And Dinwiddie was so outraged before the whistle had even blown. He'd already like reached for his coach's challenge flag. And then the instant that whistle was blown and he's looked around, there's no flag, he didn't even wait to hear on his headphones that, yeah, that's pass interference. You should challenge this. So he not only threw his challenge flag, he threw his play card on the field and he threw his headphones on the field. He was so irate with the officials. He threw everything he had on the field, and that didn't get overturned either. And so that was a little bit of a mystery. Oh no, sorry, that was the third play. I missed the holding call in between. After on 2nd and 15, that's when they got sent back 10 yards for holding, and that's another play that I didn't see the hold. I saw a shove, I didn't see a hold, and so it was 2nd and 25, and that's when the Tavares Daniels play happened. It was the third straight play where Dinwiddie was irate with the officials. I don't know. Was I missing something on the TV broadcast that you saw?
No, I didn't. It didn't look like PI.
Okay.
It looked just kind of Tavares just kind of. It wasn't really a great route. Like it wasn't really like it would like in basketball terms it would have been a bailout call. Like it was like it wasn't really a great route, and they sort of were near each other, but it didn't register for PI for me.
And I'll take your word on that because I didn't get a replay of that, but like what it looked like to me was it looked like Tavares's arm was being held as they ran across the field and that he had to kind of shake free of it.
It was more like, I mean, honestly, I took it to be more like, well, I mean, we always look at PI differently, but
yes, you and
I took it to be more
page.
okay hand fighting, and it was it kind of the sloppy ending to the play made it look more messy than it was.
And he almost came up with that catch too. That would have been a huge victory for that offense if he'd been able to hang on to that ball. But yeah, it wasn't to be. Tavares only finished the game with one catch. He was targeted 4 times, but it's got to be more balls on target. It's got to be better decisions from the quarterbacks. That's you look at the receiving numbers. Like you just can't have Kadeem Carey be your leading receiver. Makai Polk led in yards with 49 on 3 catches. I thought he looked pretty good, but they just didn't have enough success throwing the football. So, oh my goodness, rough.
I mean,
rough
I
time.
did like when they basically just switched to the run game, and it worked because I mean that's what they were giving them, and they took it and they were able to have a semblance, of some offensive timing. And maybe if Arbuckle can get all the reps, he can get some RPO timing down, and maybe he can do like a run game RPO thing. You really still just need to survive a couple more games.
That's got to be the hope. Like Kadeem Carey ended up with 6.2 yards per carry. And in a game where none of your passes are going where you want them to, usually it's pretty hard to run because then the defense just kind of abandons their plans to cover the pass at all and they just stuff the box. And I thought Winnipeg was looking run. I thought Winnipeg was looking for Carey, but it felt like when Toronto went heavy, there was nothing Winnipeg could do about that. Toronto bringing out the extra lineman, it was I think it was Vendal that came out to play guard, and they kicked Ryan Hunter out to the tight end spot, and then had Awashe as the other tight end. They were running out of that formation really nicely near the end of the game there, and that's how they were sort of able to move the football. And there were 2 drives where they were able to move the football, and that was all largely on the shoulders of Kadeem Carey. JB, let's talk about some of those plays at the end of the game that really were maybe questionable. So in the overtime, first of all, are you a go first or go second guy in overtime? Like, what do you want the ball first? Or you want the ball second?
No, so I think I want the ball second for sure. I mean, I think there was some disagreement on Winnipeg's point of view as to which end they wanted to head.
Yeah, well, because I know Big Hill sort of pointed to one end, but I think he was thinking of it as the defense. Like we want as the defense to be at this end, but they had the ball first, and so that's the end they started in. There was definitely confusion there because that's how I interpreted that as well. And then the Argos step up with some really good D. They force a fairly long field goal, and it looked to me like that snap was high, and that just throws off the mechanics.
100%. And the thing is, once you get over 30 yards, you can't have a bad snap. Like under 30 yards, you can get away with it. Over 30 yards, you have to have perfect mechanics. If you have a bad snap, 90% of the time you're going to miss the kick. You just can't have it. You can't have a bad snap at over 30 yards. It's too difficult to kick to not have perfect mechanics. So as soon as the high snap came, I knew that he wasn't going to make it.
And at the end of the first half, the snap and hold looked fine, but to me it looked like the left side of the Toronto, or I guess it'd be the right side of Toronto's line came through. There were 2 players that came through untouched through that line, and to me it looked like that hurried the kick from Castillo, and that's what may have resulted in him pulling that ball a little bit. But it was hard to see without getting a replay of that one. Is this a game where? Well, I know the answer to this, so instead of phrasing it as a question, I'm just going to say, like, as an offensive coach, I know exactly what the feeling is right now in the Toronto locker room for their offensive players. You don't want to, even with the win, you do not want to look at any of your defender teammates in the eye because you did not pull your weight tonight with this victory. And had this been a loss, it would be much worse. Like you don't even want to go to the locker room. You just want to just go home from the field. But the defense was outstanding tonight. 5 turnovers, 4 forced fumbles, 1 interception, and a pick 6, and 5 sacks to go along with it. Think about that. 5 sacks, 5 turnovers, a pick 6. The defense could not have played better tonight against Winnipeg.
The defensive line was fantastic. I thought Holly played great. Um, you know, Sarizna is everything we hoped he would be. In total, he's a game changer. And those turnovers were all forced. Like those were forced through contact and putting a helmet on a ball and punching a ball out. And so even though, yes, Winnipeg did for some reason fumble the ball all the time, those fumbles weren't just people kind of dropping the ball. I mean, that was the defense bringing violence and creating fumbles. So I thought the defense looked as physical as I've seen it look all season. I thought that they got after the quarterback. I thought the quarterback, I thought Collaros was concussed. I don't know why they let him back in the game. He seemed off to me. His body language, his sideline demeanor, everything about him from TV looked off the whole game. I mean, I know he made some big deep throws, but I thought the defense was all over him the whole game.
He got
Made
hit so
it,
hard.
and they just made it possible to steal it at the end, and they were fantastic in overtime. They got to him, and then fantastic pass breakup in overtime. I mean, they won the overtime. It was quite a performance from the defense.
Yeah, they hit Collaros again and again and again. He was constantly having to slowly pick himself up off the turf. And it was from everybody. It was, Priester was sent and got a hit on him. Pierce was sent. Franklin was sent on a blitz. Did Franklin get credit with a quarterback sack? I think he did. Yeah. Franklin, when's the last time we saw a corner blitz? You just don't see a lot of those in the CFL. And to send Benji Franklin at that stage, it looked like the formation may have triggered that blitz, but he came flying in and took down Collaros. And then those turnovers, like you said, the fumbles. Fraser Sopix was the only one that wasn't caused by a hard hit. Sopik made a nice play. He punched the ball out from behind as he went to wrap. Every other one of those turnovers was somebody getting their helmet on the football and just jarring it loose. The Wolotarski hit was, oh my goodness, that was such a hard hit to like the liver.
And then, oh my God, they hit him.
Oh, they hit him
so incredibly hard.
And the Priester hit as well on Dembski coming across. Again, it was, hat on the football. And it was just the Argos defense was flying. And how about Priester in a game where we didn't even know if he was going to play? He was out with a shoulder injury last week, got pulled from the game, couldn't quite get back in there. He was limited in practice this week, finally able to go full at the end of the week. And I was kind of thinking of him as like, maybe this guy's going to be a game time decision. He was out there and he was one of the best players on the football field.
Amazing. He had that incredible shoulder-led tackle in the underneath. I mean, the tackling of the underneath stuff was far improved. I thought that in general the wrap-up tackling was much better. And for the most part they kept Oliveira in check. I mean, he broke a couple big ones, but he was not the hammer that they were able to use to open up the pass. And even the deep pass, unfortunately, was our old buddy cover two. Because we had a lot of people covering the flats and nobody covering deep.
Yeah, that touchdown to Ontario Wilson, I couldn't see, and again, I didn't get to see a replay of that. What it looked like to me live was kind of like what you're talking about. So they had hit about 5 or 6 passes in a row where everybody got walked off deep, and then Collaros would dump it off to somebody on a drag route or Oliveira slipping out of the backfield. And I feel like that's where, I don't know if that was Benji Franklin. I don't even know who was on that side, not having seen that replay, but somebody got their head in the backfield thinking this is going to be another dump off. And Ontario Wilson just ran right by, and he almost threw the ball out of bounds. He was so wide open, I think he didn't know what to do with it. And Wilson the ball lands in his hands, threw it up in the air, grabbed it just before it went out of bounds, and walked in for the touchdown. But yeah, that was the only bad play I think the defense had all night. Well, maybe losing Oliveira up the middle for that big middle run when you knew middle run was coming. But yeah, the defense, you can't point fingers at this defense after their effort tonight. I just want to run through to give their guys their laurels. You had quarterback sacks from Benji Franklin, 2 from Jake Serezna, 1 from Holly, and 1 from Woody Barron. who got in there as well. And then the forced fumbles, Metier, Sopik, Franklin, Priester, and then the interception, of course, from Tavares McFadden. Everybody contributed. Wyndham McManus had some big plays. Like, it felt like everybody was doing their part tonight to keep that Winnipeg Blue Bombers offense from scoring points. JB, let's get into your player of the game, and then we'll do our player of the game. Who is your player of the game tonight?
Well, look, it could have been a couple of people. I would say early, I had Holly probably as my leading candidate for player of the game. Wasn't sure where the thing was going to go. Obviously, there was some great play in the secondary, but for me, I have to give it to McFadden. To come off the couch, I know he was working out and staying in shape, but essentially to come from not playing to starting to scoring the winning touchdown to being a factor and adding to the energy of the defense. It was like he came back from injury. It was amazing. I think the team really was excited to have him back, and I got to give him the nod. I mean, I don't think he necessarily was the best Argo tonight, but to come back and be able to start and be able to settle that secondary, and to contribute, with the winning touchdown, or almost winning touchdown. I think for me, McFadden is my player of the game.
And it wasn't just the pick six for McFadden. He had two knockdowns that were critical. One was in the corner of the end zone. And if he doesn't get up to full extension, that's a completed pass. That's a touchdown. It ends up being a field goal instead. Like, that was a massive play in the game. And I can't remember when in the game his other knockdown was, but that was an impressive one too. So yeah, McFadden, absolutely deserving. I'm going to go in a different direction. And I want to give a shout out to Deshaun Amos, because I thought he played really well. He made a lot of plays, made things happen. Typically, teams don't go after Deshaun Amos. He hasn't been mentioned a lot this season because he's doing his job, and quarterbacks want to steer clear of him. And they did attack him tonight, and they paid for it when they did. And so Deshaun Amos, I think, gets honorable mention. I'm going to give my player to the game of the game to Robert Priester, who, as I just think back at all the plays he made, a guy that comes in 180 pounds, and he was giving up 45 pounds of weight to Brady Oliveira a couple times, just knocked him flat on his back. He was playing just absolute dogged football out there, throwing his body around, putting himself in harm's way, making play after play after play, and initiating huge hits, which is something I didn't know was in his arsenal, because I didn't view him as that style of player. When they brought him in to play Sam, I was thinking, I don't know, this is not the kind of physical player that you necessarily want playing that Sam position. He proved me wrong tonight. If it wasn't on the quarterback sack, it was on the forced fumble, it was on all the other hits that he made, throwing Oliveira to the ground. Robert Priester gets my player of the game nod tonight. And what is your play of the game, JB?
Well, obviously I had to come late. And even though I think in my heart of hearts, I do think he achieved the first down, look, who am I to override the command center? I have to give the play of the game to the defensive line, stopping Strevler. Even if he did just get it, he barely got it. He's incredible. He's a big dude. That is a big line. They have been very successful. I think they were like 25 in a row or something, converting first downs. And that defensive line stood him up, and and just made it possible for there to be a bad spot. So like you don't get a bad spot without great play on that play. So and that won the football game. So for me, I gotta give it to that defensive line. I thought they competed incredibly hard all game, and that was the game-winning play for me.
And I always like to go offense, but I can't. There's not even something to choose from offensively. No. And so I've got to go on the defensive side of the ball, and there were multiple plays that I could have picked. And I'm just going to go with the obvious one, which is the pick six, because not only was it points on the board, and the Argos just had no way they needed a special teams or defensive score. That was the only way they were going to win this football game, is if the defense scored points, and they stepped up at the exact right moment and did that in the fourth quarter. And for it to be Tavares McFadden, like you said, was such a huge lift for this team. He was fired up. The stadium was fired up. It was the biggest crowd of the season that the Argos had, with 15,000 people in here. And the place went bananas. They were waiting for something to cheer for. McFadden gave it to them. And it felt like at that moment, I know that didn't end the game, but it felt like at that moment, you know what, the Argos are going to win this football game. Now I changed my mind 5 minutes later, but it felt like they were headed to the winner's circle.
And shout out Game Ops for firing the cannon and getting the touchdown cheer going, and really putting it on the command center about how much they wanted to undo Christmas morning in Toronto. So I celebrate how much they celebrated that touchdown.
Yeah, they were right on that. They played the Argos fight song. They played the long version. They played the full extended version of the Argos fight song throughout the entire center. Review. They fired the cannon off. The everything about that was
solid pressure. Hey, that's why you play at home.
Yeah, home field advantage is a thing. Any final thoughts, JB, as we look to wrap this one up?
Well, I mean, yeah. Look, I was sort of in a thinking it was going to be a darker pod as I was watching Winnipeg sort of drain the time, and I'm like, oh God, here's this team that's got 3 tires, and we're just going to keep driving down the road. But they were able to steal this. I think they're still in pretty good shape. I don't believe in Ottawa. I don't care, Ottawa. I have unfortunately watched a number of your games due to gambling reasons, and I do not believe in you, Ottawa. Yeah, I think they're doing fine. This is what we thought. We thought at the beginning of the year, if they could be 4-5 after 9 weeks, that would be success. And so I think it's not going to be pretty. We didn't think it would be pretty. I think everybody has to remember that this is success. I mean, I feel worse for Winnipeg. I don't know what's happening at Winnipeg. I mean, I think that team is. I don't know. I don't know what to make of Winnipeg, but they're a weird team that doesn't seem to have any chemistry. It's a very odd team. So I think Toronto defense looks fantastic. We were going to have to survive a couple more games with smoke and mirrors and special teams touchdowns and defensive touchdowns. And and then turn the page.
And I just want to close with one final comment on Peter Martin, who we referenced earlier in the podcast to lead off in this post-game reaction episode. I thought the Argos did a really nice job of very quickly getting together a way to honor Peter Martin, who passed away this past week, and he was. If you're listening to this podcast, you know who Peter Martin was and the impact that he had on the Argonauts, but on hundreds and hundreds of football players and students and Argos fans around the world, playing for the Argos and then coaching for decades, teaching for decades, and then going on to become the color commentator on the radio broadcast for decades as well. He was honored a month ago. The last time the Argos were at home here, he was honored as an all-time Argos builder. And I think, full credit to the organization, not only to make that happen while Pete was still alive to see it and to appreciate how much he meant to that organization. I think that was huge. And then for them to respond this quickly and have the PM stickers on everybody's helmet honoring him. And this was very much a Pete Martin style of game. And so it just, it couldn't have gone more perfectly. And the moment of silence was very moving before the anthem as well. So everything was handled the right way by the organization. And I thought it was a wonderful tribute to a wonderful, wonderful Argos contributor and someone that the Argos and Argos fans owe a lot to. Well, that will just about do it for us on this post-game reaction episode of the X's and Argos podcast. From BMO Field, the Argos 16, the Blue Bombers 14. For JB, this is Ben Grant saying so long, and may all your pre-snap reads be good ones. I'll see you.